sure are a lot of filters out there on the market today. How is an amateur astronomer to figure out what filter is right for them? Well, that is the topic of today's video. Hi, I'm Jim the Filter Guy, and you are at the Abbey Road Observatory. This is part 2 of a 4-part video series all about understanding astronomical filters. This video is about how to choose the right filter for you and how to use it properly. I hope you like it. But before we get into that, why don't you take a minute to click the like button if you are enjoying these videos I'm doing. And if you'd like to keep up on everything the ARO is doing, hit the subscribe button too. Alright, let's get going with the discussion of how to choose and use astronomical filters. Welcome everyone to this, the second of a 4-part video series titled Understanding Astronomical Filters. In this video, I will discuss how to use them. Part 1 of this video series talked about what astronomical filters are, what they do, how they work, and some basic nomenclature. In this video, I will provide guidance on how to select filters for enhancing your solar system observing and for reducing light pollution. I will also give some tips on how to effectively use filters to improve your experience, whether you are a visual observer or an imager. In Part 3, I will discuss special filters, such as for solar observing or optics correction. And in Part 4, I will discuss some advanced topics relating to filters, such as use with fast optics and extremely narrow passbands. We have lots to talk about, so let's get a move on and start discussing how to use them. Recall from Part 1 that I gave an example of how filters can be used to enhance planetary observing. Specifically, I used this example of Mars observing, where by using a red, green, or blue filter, it was possible to enhance the visibility of certain features. Let's talk more on this subject, specifically what color filters are the most useful. Recall that filters are used to darken some features but not others. This is accomplished primarily using absorption-type color filters. The filter spectra plotted here are for the most common color filters that you will find available to amateur astronomers. The color of the lines on the plots is selected to be as close as I could get to the actual filter color. Remembering our filter nomenclature from Part 1, blue and green filters are all broad bandpass filters. Yellow, orange, and red filters are all high-pass filters. Pinks, purples, and browns are all combinations of high-pass and bandpass filters. There is quite a long list shown here of different filter colors. Do we need to have all of them in our accessory bag? Which filters are best to use is unfortunately very subjective. There is a lot of trial and error required, and in the end it comes down to personal preference. If you like, you can read astronomy books or find online resources that will tell you the best filter to use for observing the various features on the planets. The end result will be a list as long as your arm of the filters you simply must have in your kit. The alternative is to take the advice of a poor schmuck who actually took the time to test all of these combinations for himself. Personally, I have found most filters do very little to improve the view. The list of filters that actually do something significant to the view is short. On Mars or Jupiter, a magenta filter, like a Raton number 47 or a number 30, does a good job of enhancing contrast of features. A red filter on the Moon or Mars also works well to sharpen the image and improve contrast. A light tan or orange filter, like a Raton number 81 or number 85, is also beneficial for enhancing details in the bands on Jupiter and Saturn. If you often observe the nearly full moon or Venus, you may also want to use a variable polarizer or neutral density filter to cut the brightness. Now, if you are lazy like me and just want one all-purpose filter for planetary observing, you may want to consider a special type of filter called a moon and sky glow, or more generically, a neodymium filter. One important thing to remember about color filters is that filters block light, so your view will be darker. Dark filters, those with a low value of luminous transmissivity or %LT, may require a large aperture scope to be used effectively. Based on my own experience and the anecdotes of other observers, I have constructed this graph relating color filter %LT to minimum telescope aperture. As an example, assume you are observing using a 100 mm or 4-inch aperture scope. From the graph, the suggestion is to only use color filters with %LT values of 30% or higher. Based on this table of %LT values I have calculated, that would mean a number 80A blue or number 38A dark blue would be too dark to use if your vision is mostly dark adapted, but probably okay if looking at a bright object like the moon or Venus. For those of you who are imaging solar system objects, contrast, color, etc. can all be controlled after the fact during post-processing, so a color filter is not needed. The main concern is seeing, the unsteadiness in the view resulting from turbulence in our planet's atmosphere. At a minimum, you should use a UV-IR cut filter to sharpen your view, or try filters passing red or infrared only, as seeing has less of an impact at long wavelengths. If you're interested in learning more about infrared imaging, check out my video titled Seeing Beyond the Visible. Again, a good all-purpose filter for imaging exists. The moon and sky glow I mentioned earlier does a pretty good job of cutting UV-IR as well as enhancing contrast. Moving on to deep sky observing now, let's review again what sort of benefits can be realized when using a filter. Recall this image I showed in part 1 of the Flame and Horsehead Nebula, captured from my backyard during an electronically assisted astronomy session, but not using a filter. Compare that to the same view after a multi-narrowband filter has been added. Clearly there is an advantage to using a filter on a mission nebula. As another example, consider this hand sketch I made while visually observing M42, the Orion Nebula, from my backyard in Ottawa using a 4-inch refractor. Without a filter, all I could make out was a smudge of nebulosity around the trapezium stars. Adding a medium broadband filter improved the contrast and allowed a bit more of the features around the perimeter to be visible. Moving then to a narrowband oxygen 3 filter resulted in a large improvement in the amount of faint structure that I could see. Finally, the multi-narrowband filter gave the best view, with subtle differences in the brightness of the features now visible. How deep sky filters work has to do entirely with their spectra. They are designed to pass only the desired wavelengths of light, in this case, those from emission nebulae. those wavelengths correspond to emissions from different gases, such as hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. For galaxy emissions, infrared is also an emission of interest. Deep sky filters block light pollution to varying degrees depending on the filter category, of which there are 4. Broadband filters have one large passband around hydrogen beta and oxygen 3. They are meant for visual use, so they often do not pass hydrogen alpha. For convenience, I have subdivided broadband filters into 4 subcategories based on their bandwidth: extra wide, wide, medium, and narrow. Narrowband filters have a single passband located at one of the desirable wavelengths for emissions from nebulae. They are available in a range of bandwidths, with filters in the 10 to 20 nanometer wide range being suitable for visual and imaging use, and those narrower than 10 nanometers being suitable only for imaging. Multi-broadband filters have combinations of multiple bands of various widths. They are designed to block discrete wavelengths corresponding to different sources of light pollution. They provide the best white balance of all the deep sky filters, but their overall light pollution reduction capability is poor. LED lighting, that has become progressively more popular in the past few years, makes these filters even less effective. The final category is multi-narrowband. These are a relatively new category of filter, being available only for the last 10 years or so. Multi-narrowband filters have 2 or more narrow passbands centered on desirable nebula emissions. And by narrow, I mean less than 20 nanometers wide. You will often see these filters referred to as dual, tri, or quad band filters, depending on the number of nebula emission bands they capture. These filters maximize the amount of light pollution that is blocked, and have become especially popular amongst one-shot color camera owners. Due to their growing popularity, there are a large number of multi-narrowband filters available today. This graph illustrates the offerings presently available, plotted according to their bandwidths. The color of each dot reflects the cost of each filter in US dollars. I have tested a lot of filters in my day, but the majority of them have been multi-narrowband filters. The result of all my filter testing is that I can confidently say the best filter to use is... let's wait before I reveal this useful tidbit. First, I want to talk more about how one chooses the best deep sky filter for their application. So, how does one choose what deep sky filter to use? Well, like planetary filters, we want to increase contrast, and interference-type filters are the most capable of delivering accurate, high transmission passbands around our wavelengths of interest. The best filter to use depends on a number of things, including the nature of the light pollution, the type of deep sky object you are trying to observe, the size and type of optics you are using, and in the case of imaging or electronically assisted astronomy, the tracking capability of your mount. The next couple of slides discuss these 4 factors in more detail, starting with light pollution, which is all the light entering your telescope from sources located between us and the deep sky object. The most obvious source of light pollution comes from man-made outdoor lighting, some of which illuminates our view directly, and some illuminates the sky by scattering off dust and moisture in the atmosphere. There is also a naturally occurring component of light pollution, generally referred to as sky glow. This light is emitted by atoms in the Earth's upper atmosphere that are energized by the sun's UV rays during the day. The final naturally occurring source of light pollution is, of course, the moon. It acts like a big mirror, reflecting the sun's rays back at us, thus giving it a broad light spectrum. As suggested by the component spectra shown on the right, light pollution consists of both broadband and narrowband emissions. To understand the implications of this on our filter choices, we next have to look at the spectra of deep sky objects. Deep sky objects can be grouped into two categories based on the nature of the light they give off. The first category is broad spectrum objects. This includes galaxies, star clusters, and reflection nebulae. Basically anything that we can see because of light emitted from stars. The fact that these objects have broad spectrums makes them very difficult to pick out from light pollution using a filter. The second category of objects are narrow band emitters. These objects include H2 regions, planetary nebulae, and supernova remnants. Any objects that we can see because of light given off by excited gases like hydrogen or oxygen. Because these objects emit at very specific wavelengths, they are much easier to separate from light pollution using a filter. The last thing to consider before choosing our deep sky filter is telescope aperture. Remembering from earlier, filters block light, resulting in a darker view. This means that the %LT of a filter will limit the aperture of scope you will be able to use it with, visually. This plot provides a general recommendation for how dark a filter you can use for different sized scopes. At the top, I have marked off the ranges of %LT that are common for the different categories of deep sky filter. So, for example, if you wanted to use a typical medium broadband filter with a 4-inch refractor, you'd probably be okay. Trying to use a narrowband visual filter with a 4-inch refractor is probably pushing your luck. For imaging or electronically assisted astronomy, there is no such limit on scope size because you can simply compensate with more exposure time. This does, however, mean that you will need progressively better mount tracking the narrower the filter is you want to use. There is one final thing to note in regards to aperture. The impact of a filter on broad spectrum objects is much worse than for narrow band objects because the filter is blocking light from the object as well as the light pollution. At last we have come to where the rubber hits the road. What is the best deep sky filter to use? If you are observing or imaging a narrow-band object, the best filter to use is the narrowest bandpass filter your aperture or mount tracking will handle, regardless of how much light pollution you have, be it Bortle 2 or Bortle 9. Adding an IR cut filter can also help to improve contrast if using a camera. If you are observing broad-spectrum objects from a dark sky, don't use any filter for visual observing. If imaging, an IR cut filter can help contrast, but the improvement is small. If visually observing broad-spectrum objects from a light-polluted location, I'm afraid there isn't a filter that can help. If using a camera, however, a wide to medium broadband filter that passes infrared works best. If If you're using a monochrome camera, an even better contrast can be achieved using an infrared high-pass filter, although long exposure times will result. I have one additional thing to note about trying to image in infrared using a refractor. Most ED doublets and Apo triplets are okay, but achromats do not do well focusing IR light along with the visible spectrum, resulting in fuzzy, bloated stars. The same is true of many camera lenses. For these types of optics, you can see a large improvement in your images by using an IR cut filter. To drive home the impact of using progressively narrower filters, consider the following series of images of the North American nebula, captured from relatively dark skies. This first image is the view as seen using no filter. The nebula is visible, but the view isn't great. It is difficult to make out the nebula amongst all the many Milky Way stars. Adding progressively narrower filters, from wide broadband to medium broadband, brings out more and more detail in the nebula. You will also notice that the stars are becoming progressively fainter. Adding a UV IR cut filter to the medium broadband filter further increases the image contrast. Further improvement in contrast is achieved by moving to progressively narrower band passes. First, a multi-narrowband filter, and finally, a narrowband hydrogen alpha filter. Note that all 6 images have the same total exposure time of 5 minutes. Besides the beneficial effects mentioned already, filters have a number of other effects on your observing or imaging. The first thing to note is that filters change the scene's white balance. Broadband filters add a magenta hue, O3 a green hue, H-beta cyan, H-alpha red, and IR pass a brownish red color. Some filters are better than others for white balance. For example, multi-broadband filters give a good color-balanced image. For those of you who are doing EAA or imaging, post-processing may or may not be able to completely correct for the hue added to the scene by the filter. Another effect to note is that filters change your focus slightly because of refraction across the glass substrate. Enough that if you change from one filter to another, there is a good chance you will need to refocus. That is why many users like to purchase all their filters from the same manufacturer, so the glass is all the same thickness, permitting filter changes without refocusing. Finally, filters add 2 more surfaces in your optical train to have reflections off of, although anti-reflective coatings can help. Filter surfaces can also collect dirt, dust, or dew, so yet another thing to keep clean. The final aspect of astronomical filters to talk about is cost. It is tempting to save money and go with a cheaper option, but quality really does suffer. Cheap filters are prone to reflections, halos, delamination, poor machining, optical distortion, poor optical transmission, and various other issues. There are a lot of filter manufacturers available, perhaps too many. I put them into 5 groups, ranging from premium filters, which are super expensive, to high quality, which have proven themselves to provide a consistently good performing product, followed by good value, which are brands that are significantly cheaper than other brands but still deliver a high level of performance, and discount brands, which will do the job but tend to have lower performance. The 5th group of filter manufacturers are brands that you should avoid as in my experience, their filters often fall short of their published performance. Noted in green text are Astronomic, Antlia, and Optolong, which are my favorite brands in the high-quality category, and amongst the good value manufacturers I have had good success recently with SV Bonney. That brings me to the end of Part 2. My advice to you regarding what filters to use is to keep an open mind. I have given you recommendations based on my own personal experience, but if you have an opportunity to try other filters, say those borrowed from someone in your local astronomy club, then I suggest you take it. Don't feel obligated to run out and buy a big mittful of filters. Start with a good quality general-purpose filter, such as an Antlia Quad Band ALP or IDIS GNB, and see how it works with your equipment and your observing conditions. Once you know what can be achieved with that filter, you can slowly add filters to expand your capabilities. Don't forget that amateur astronomy is supposed to be fun. Take the time to try different filters on different types of objects, and talk to your fellow club members or with online groups. Thanks for watching How to Use Astronomical Filters. Keep your eyes peeled for Part 3 in the series, which will talk all about special filters. If anyone has any questions about this video or about astronomical filters in general, please feel free to leave a comment below. Alternatively, you can contact me by email at the address listed in my channel description. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you're interested in seeing more of my videos on filters or other astronomy-related topics, please subscribe to my channel. Take care and see you next time.